my name is Birdie and I am your friendly neighborhood forest witch, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a witchy book review. So 2 weeks ago I put a poll up on the community tab asking if any of you would like me to do a book review on Old Ways, Old Secrets by Joe Kerrigan, and the majority of you said that you would. So that's what today's video is going to be about. I'm going to apologize in advance if I mispronounce any of the Irish names or words. I often mispronounce words that aren't even from a different country. So I do want to apologize in advance for that. Also, this video is probably going to be really long, so grab yourself a beverage and a snack. Today, my beverage of choice is a chai latte. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this book review. So at the start of the book, Kerrigan gives a brief history about all Ireland's invaders and how much they coveted the land and its beauty. And she actually gives a beautiful quote regarding this. So I want to read this to you out of the book here. It says, "Today's invaders are more likely to descend from a tour bus than a boat, carry guidebooks and cameras rather than a broadsword, shield, or crucifix. But they still seek something that only Ireland can give, something that has retained beneath its modern layers, something that is there for the taking, for all those that have eyes to see. And like their predecessors, over thousands of years, they too will be changed." I absolutely love this quote. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I'm very passionate about Ireland, and I actually have plans to visit there next year. So this quote is so true to my heart, and I absolutely love it. So I actually learned a lot from reading this book. I didn't realize that the Celts weren't the first people to inhabit Ireland. Several clans, including the Firbog and the people of Danu, the great earth goddess, preceded the Celts. The Celts actually attacked these two clans and took over Ireland, which is actually surprising to me because the Celts are so highly regarded in Ireland. Then Kerrigan continues her book by splitting it into 3 parts. The first part is called The Keepers of Power, and she discusses druids, deities, and superheroes. So druids were known as the most important people in Ireland. They were guides, advisors, guardians of the law, genealogists, historians, herbal healers. They had a vital link with the other world, and they also held extensive knowledge in tree lore and even epic tales of heroic events. A thunderstorm is actually rolling in here in Indiana, and it's perfect timing for this next segment. And this next segment is so cool to me, not of what happened, of course, but of what we still have from this event in history. Holy cow. So when the Celts invaded Ireland, the Druids of the Daedanan, I think it is, caused a storm and a thick mist to rise, concealing all of Ireland. However, Emergen, I believe his name is, he's a poet and Celtic Druid, crafted a spell to reverse these efforts and enabled the Celts to gain the land. And the amazing thing is, this spell still survives, and it goes as follows. "I pray that we reach the land of Erin, we who are riding upon the great productive vast sea, that we be distributed upon her plains, her mountains, and her valleys, upon her forests that shed showers of nuts and all other fruits, upon her rivers and her cataracts, upon her lakes and her great waters, upon her abounding springs, that we may hold fairs and equestrian sports upon her territories, that there may be a king from us in Tara, and that Tara be the territory of our many kings, that the son of Milesius be manifestly seen upon her territories, that noble Erin be the home of the ships and the boats of the sons of Milesius, Erin, which is now in darkness. It is for her that this oration is pronounced. Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills. I absolutely love that we still have that. That is amazing. When the thunder rolls, then the lightning strikes. Anyways, Druids were also conscious of the earth, the skies, the stars, and the moon. They could advise on the best time to undertake a particular task. For example, with spring comes gardening and farming. Hence, the Druids would advise to never plant seeds on the nights of the new moon or the full moon. The best time of all is 2 nights before the full moon. And I'll have to remember this as I start my garden this year. Furthermore, Irish Druids used trees for divination, and every settlement had its own sacred tree under which all ceremonies were conducted. I think this is so neat. One of the most magical trees in Irish belief was the rowan or mountain ash, and it is still regarded as a fairy tree today, which is so cool. And according to the Druids, you can actually plant the rowan, the hawthorn, and the apple around your home to keep it safe from malevolent influences and unwelcome visitors. As long as these trees flourish, your home and family will be safe. Then, with my love for birds, one of my favorite things I learned from this book was that the bird of choice for Druidic divination was the wren. And also, Druids used ravens for determining the future and relied on the precise sounds the raven made, which I find to be so cool. And with the extensive knowledge that a Druid had, you could imagine it took years to become a Druid. And there were actually Druidic schools of learning throughout Ireland, which I found really neat. And a female Druid by the name of Bridget had a school in Kildare, I think it is, where she trained young women in the skills and knowledge of the ancient arts. This is the same goddess, modernly referred to as Saint Bridget, that pagans and some witches honor today on Imbolc. Another interesting thing I learned was that Druidic knowledge was handed down orally and committed to memory. So this was partly to develop the strength and retention of the mind, but also to protect the ancient charms, spells, rites, and traditions that were not to be made accessible to others by being written down. And Kerrigan states, it took at least 20 years to reach even the lowest levels of Druidic training. Students could become poets or bards, experts in law or augurers. Beyond that, like the shaman and other lands, to reach the highest levels of enlightenment required study and time spent alone in a remote place, usually fasting to the edge of starvation, in order to reach the elevated state of consciousness required for contact with another world. Now let's discuss the deities. In Ireland, the oldest parent spirits of earth and sky were the Earth Mother Danu and the Earth Father Cruach, I believe it is. Then, as the population grew and diversified, so did the deities. In Old Ireland, Danu was revered in special observations and the 2 great dividing points of the year, the coming of summer in May and the onset of winter as October gave way to November. During these times, the Irish would ask her for good crops, healthy flocks, many children, a gentle winter without too much storm, cold, disease, and disaster. Then, over many centuries, the central figure of the earth goddess expanded into a 3-part role, reflecting the different aspects of her nature. For example, in some European cultures, these are identified as maiden, mother, and crone, but the Irish goddess chooses slightly different roles, being in one aspect caring and helpful, in another all-wise, all-knowing, and in the third that aggressive battle queen ready to fight at any time for her beloved land. In all 3 aspects, warmth, wisdom, and warfare are still recognized and observed today. So let's go ahead and break these down. Warmth symbolizes Bridget and her power of healing. She is the goddess of spring, and a feast is held in her honor on February 1st, also known as Imbolc, and she is the only one of the old goddesses to have survived in her name and persona right through to the present day, and for good reason, because in my opinion, she is such a beautiful goddess to honor. Next is Wisdom, which symbolizes the Kalik, and I'm probably most definitely mispronouncing this one, so I will put her name up here so you can see who I'm referring to. But she's also called the Old One, who personifies the experience of age and is the guardian of the old magic, the sacred knowledge. She is the goddess of winter and holds the secrets of marriage, healing, childbirth, death, and rebirth. Through history, the Kalik has appeared as the wise woman, the witch, the seer, and the soothsayer. She is a vital person in any community and is resorted to in times of sickness, danger, or need. She is said to be the wife of the sea god Manannan Mac Lir, and thus she is linked to the sea, especially the Western Ocean. Hence, she is also invoked for a safety on the ocean, with one of her most beautiful titles being Star of the Sea. Last is Warfare, which symbolizes the Morrigan, or the Great or Phantom Queen. She is fierce, wild, demanding, and implacable. She oversaw and manipulated every famous battle of ancient Ireland. Also known as Bab, I believe it is, or Matcha, she often appears as a raven flying over the thick of the bloodshed or driving her war chariot through the battle lines. Now, there are a few other goddesses, but for time purposes, let's go ahead and move on to the gods. Crom Cruach, the Earth Father and Sun God, is best known and most important god of ancient Ireland. He has a fearful and threatening aspect, and one must tiptoe in his presence to beg for their favors. He's the god of fertility and the master of the storm, the lightning bolt, the flood, famine, and bloody sacrifice. Crom meaning leaning or bent, so he's also known as the crooked god. Cruach in Old Irish means rick, meaning of straw or hay. Hence, he ensures a successful harvest in order to stock up for the winter months. There's also Lu, the god of sun and light. He is all-powerful in battle and looks after the crops. His main feast was the Great Harvest that is still celebrated at the beginning of August, also known as Lunessa, or some call it Lammas. And then, as briefly mentioned earlier, there's also Manannan Mac Lir, who is the god of the sea, seafaring, boats, and fishing. He's also the creator of storms and the savior of sailors. So, like the goddesses, there are also several gods, but for time purposes, let's go ahead and move on to part 2 of the book. So in part 2, Kerrigan discusses nature and the other world, specifically sacred places and magical creatures and the turning of the year. She delves into the lore of the sea and tells of the seafaring customs in Ireland. She also mentions the spirits of the running water and the sacred wells that are scattered everywhere in Ireland and are still revered and honored today. I actually wrote down several places she describes in this section that I want to scope out and see when I visit Ireland next year. As far as magical creatures go, Ireland is big on fairies. Kerrigan discusses the fairy islands surrounding Ireland and says, "The next time you see a little whirlwind of dry leaves suddenly rising from the ground and circling before blowing away, be sure to bow or raise your hat. It's caused by a fairy wind, and it means the good people are passing." And it is also a good idea to keep a crust of bread in your pocket if you are walking alone in the hills. Should a sudden desperate faintness come upon you, you'll need that sustenance, and quickly. It means you've walked on the hungry grass, a spot where some poor soul died of starvation in centuries past. Kerrigan also mentions a song called The Fairy Tree, made famous by Count John McCormick in 1930. It's a fascinating mixture of legend, tradition, history, and religious influence. Isabel Leslie is credited with writing the lyrics, but it is possible that she took an older version and changed it to make it more acceptable to the Christian audience. However, I want to go ahead and play you this song because it is beautiful regardless.
All night around the thorn tree the little people play, and men and women passing will turn their heads away. From break of dawn till moonrise alone it stands on high, with twisted sprigs for branches across the winter sky. They'll tell you dead men hung there in black and bitter fruit, to guard the buried treasure around which it twined its root. They'll tell you Cromwell hung them, but that could never be. He'd be in dread like others to touch the fairy tree. But Katie Ryan saw there in some sweet dream she had the blessed Son of Mary, and all his face was sad. She dreamt she heard him saying, "Why should they be afraid? Why should they be afraid, when from a branch of thorn tree the crown I wore was made?" From moonrise round the thorn tree the little people play, and men and women passing will turn their heads away. For if your heart's a child's heart, and if your eyes are clean, you'll never fear the thorn tree that grows beyond Clacheen.
Lastly, in part 2 of the book, Kerrigan explains the Celtic calendar. Now, the Celtic calendar intersects the 4 great lunar festivals with the 2 solar festivals of Midwinter and MidSummer. The Celtic New Year begins at Samhain, summer's end, on November 1st. And according to Celtic philosophy, Samhain is the perfect time for the new year because growth starts slowly beneath the ground during these darker months of the year, so that when the sun returns, everything will be ready to burst forth. I also learned where some popular fall activities originated from. For example, bobbing for apples, whether it be in a bucket of water or hung from the rafters, was once done by adults as a fertility ritual on Samhain. Also, trick-or-treating arose from a need to protect home and hearth. For example, Kerrigan writes, "Going from house to house in ghostly robes is fun for children today, but the custom arose from a need to protect home and hearth. If malevolent spirits approached a settlement, they would believe that others of their kind were there before them, and so would head off somewhere else. The children at your door at Halloween are doing you signal service by warning off something more unpleasant, and they deserve little gifts as a reward for their labors." After Samhain comes Midwinter, also known as winter solstice or Yule. Once the turning point of the shortest day had passed, the Irish would celebrate by sharing their precious hoard of fruit, grain, and salted meat to honor the returning sun god. Then, after Midwinter, comes Imbolc on February 1st. On this day, children would make their own little Bridget dolls out of straw and carry them from house to house, asking for sweets and pennies. They'd also be encouraged to collect evergreens, ferns, and colorful fabric to decorate the local sacred well dedicated to St. Bridget. The Brat Bride ritual is also customary on Imbolc. Kerrigan says, "It is the custom to leave a length of cloth or ribbon known as the Brat Bride or Bridget's cloak, draped over a bush on the eve of Imbolc, so that the goddess will lay her hand on it in blessing as she passes by. This is brought in the next morning and kept throughout the year to lay gently on those with sore throats, coughs, and colds." Next comes May 1st, which is Beltane, and Beltane is one of the two most ancient and powerful festivals in the Celtic calendar, the other being Samhain. In earlier times, though, cattle were driven into the hills to graze for the season. Now, however, animals are brought to a sacred well reserved especially for them. For centuries, people have led their sheep, their goats, their horses, and cattle to drink at the source on May morning, while others come to fill a bottle which is stored in the barn and used throughout the year to treat animal ailments. Also on Beltane, Druids would light bonfires on May morning to honor the nature gods. All household fires were extinguished the evening before and only lit again with a brand from the ceremonial blaze. In the 20th century, cattle were driven through the bonfire smoke to give them additional good health. Today, the Beltane bonfire has largely been transferred to the MidSummer festivals. Next is MidSummer, also known as Litha, and during this festival, the Irish actually have fire building rituals, and the smoke from hundreds of fires can be seen all around the city. Kerrigan writes, "The fire honors the sun at its highest point. It had to be lit at sunset and tended until midnight had passed, and ancient communities gathered on hilltops, rocky outcrops, or at crossroads specifically for this purpose. Young men and women joined hands and jumped through the flames to mark their hand fasting or official betrothal. Farmers leapt as high as they could so their crops would grow tall. A married couple might leap in the hope that the sun god would bless their union with a baby. Youth seized burning sticks and tossed them into the air as high as possible, then ducked the showers of sparks. Next day, the bonfire's cold ashes were sprinkled in the fields. If the whole ritual were not observed by the community, their crops might fail, animals die, or salmon fail to come upriver that year." Then finally comes Lunessa, also known as Lammas, and it is the first fruits festival and marks the eagerly awaited time when there would once more be fresh food on the table. People used to climb the highest hilltops of Crogpatrick to hail the sun god Lu and seek good fortune for the coming harvest. The first sheaf of corn was ceremoniously cut and carried to the mountaintop as an offering to the pagan sun god. And then finally, we are getting to the end of the book. In part 3, Kerrigan retells the 3 sorrowful tales of legends told long, long ago. And in my opinion, they are so beautifully tragic. And I not only recommend that you read them, but also this entire book, especially if you are pagan or follow any of the pagan practices, or even if you are just passionate about Ireland like I am. I think Kerrigan provides a plethora of information in this short 286-page book, and the beautiful black and white images, in my opinion, provide an extra beauty and understanding to the legends that she retells. So my rating for this would be a 4-star, only because I am a very picky rater, and I noticed that her POV or point of view changes throughout the novel. It doesn't stay consistent, so that's the only reason that I docked it a star. But other than that, I enjoyed learning so many new things about my favorite little country, and I can't wait to be standing in the places she described in such gorgeous detail. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. I know it was rather long, but I'm hoping you learned something new, just like I did when I read it. But I definitely recommend this book. I think it is such a beautiful book, and I learned so much from it. She provides a plethora of knowledge in just this one book. So if you're into Ireland or learning the ancient pagan ways, definitely pick this book up and read it. But thank you all so much for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.